Hello, and thank you for tuning in to the Hollywood Reporter's first Tony Actors Roundtable. We are very happy to be here in New York. I'm Scott Feinberg, and lest you think that we at THR cover only Hollywood, we are joined by 6 of the best actors of the theater on Broadway right now. Don't take my word for it. We have the Tony Nominating Committee's word, and so I will introduce our guests one by one. First of all, Best Actor in a Musical Tony nominee, Andy Karl, who plays Rocky Balboa in Rocky. Then, Best Actor in a Play nominee, Tony Shalhoub, who plays middle-aged Moss Hart, Moss Hart's father, and George S. Kaufman in Act 1. Best Actor in a Musical nominee, Neil Patrick Harris, Hedwig in Hedwig and the Angry Inch. Best Actor in a Play Tony nominee, Chris O'Dowd, Lennie in Of Mice and Men. Best Featured Actor in a Musical Tony nominee, James Monroe Iglehart, who is the Genie in Aladdin. And Best Actor in a Musical nominee, Jefferson Mays, who plays 9 assorted members of the Dicewith family in Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder. So thank you all very much for being here. And I think we'll begin just really at the beginning. And I want to ask you if you recall when you first acted in any way, even if it was something silly at home, I guess performed even in any way. And then if there was a moment after which you knew that that was what you wanted to do with your life. And I'm going to start with you, please.
Me? Oh, yes. Yeah. My first performance, I was 4 years old. I was at Palmacia Baptist Church. I sang a gospel song, and the minute they started applauding, I was like, this is all I want to do for the rest of my life. I want to hear that sound. Yeah. And the first time I knew I really wanted to be an actor, I was in show choir. Well, I wasn't in show choir. They asked me to be in show choir, and I said no. And I went to go see the actual choir perform, and this little kid got up, this high school kid sang, and all the girls started screaming. And I went, I want girls to scream for me. So I'm gonna join this choir. Because I could be in a bus full of sweaty dudes playing football. I could be in a bus full of crazy girls doing show choirs around the city. I'll do that. And
no turning back.
No turning back, so that's how I got here, pretty much.
How about you, Tony?
I think my first was when I was 6. And I have an older sister who was in high school at the time, and they were doing King and I at their school. And I was not asked, but taken by the hand and told that I was going to be in a play because they needed kids to be in this musical. So I was one of the little kids in Siam there. And but the hook was that, I'll never forget, this was a dress rehearsal. So there were probably 50 people sitting out in the audience. And it was the end of the first act, and all the kids were around the Miss Anna, whatever the lead was. And there was a musical number, and I happened to be in the furthest downstage position, and the curtain closed, and I was on the outside. I was the only kid on the outside of the curtain, and of course it was one of those things where I couldn't find it. And it was humiliating, but it got a huge laugh. And so it was that sort of horrible mixture of humiliation and the beginning of becoming a laugh junkie. And it's been one humiliation after another since.
Neil, how about you?
My story's not dissimilar to Tony's. I'm from a small ski resort town in the middle of New Mexico, so there wasn't a lot of arts to speak of, and the high school, Ruidoso High School, was putting on a production of The Wizard of Oz. My brother, who's 3 years older, Brian, and all of his friends were in the elementary school and were asked to go be Munchkins, audition to be Munchkins. And so I was just with my parents and in the same car and was there, and they needed someone to play Toto, the dog, and asked if I must have been 7, 8, would be Toto. And I said, sure, I didn't have any idea what it meant. And so I was part of that production and got to have makeup put on, and I was perplexed by the conceit that Toto, because the yellow brick road went through the audience. That was the directorial conceit. And then it would go up onto the stage, and I was confused. When on stage, I was on all 4s, going through the red carpet, the yellow brick road. They wanted me to stand up on my hind and walk as like a person, which is method-wise was confusing to me. Yeah. But I lost that battle.
Jefferson, how did it begin for you?
Well, I think being read aloud to as a child. I grew up in a house without a television. It fell off a table during the Vietnam War sometime. I remember helicopters, and then the basset hound ran under, got caught in the cord and dragged it, and it shattered. So ever after, my parents would pass a novel around the dinner table, and we'd all take turns reading some interminable Dickensian passage with no periods or punctuation. So I started reading aloud. But I remember vividly seeing my mother's face just transform into the different characters she was playing, Uriah Heep or Miss Havisham. And I became obsessed with that, to see this woman that I knew so well, was so familiar to me, becoming different people and different voices coming out of her mouth. And I think at that point I said, I very much want to do that.
Wow.
It's magic.
Andy.
I too had parents that were, willing to be into the arts. My mother played organ for her church, so there was always music around the house. There was piano around the house, and I sort of found music that way. Helped out for musical theater, but I didn't get into theater until high school. I was with the wrong crowd at the time in high school, and I actually got suspended for smoking in the boys' room.
All right.
My mother, just so angry, needed to find something for me to do, made me audition for Aladdin, a non-Disney version of Aladdin, and I got the lead. I don't know what so it was one of those things, and I auditioned for this role, and then I found this whole community of actors that I never knew there were such personalities, and there was such a family, and there was such a community of theater, and I got right into it and sort of found my home that way, and finding the laughs on stage, and I was hooked from then on.
Chris?
When I was around 9 or 10, I was quite shy, but the school were doing Sleeping Beauty, and I had no interest in being on the stage, or that was torture to me, but the girl who was playing Sleeping Beauty, I was quite attracted to. And there's a big kiss at the end of the play, so I had to sing a song, which I'm going to do right now. If that's, I had to sing a song, and that was a nightmare to me. But I thought, okay, well, if I get through that, I get to kiss the girl. And so I did it, and it was like, I think we maybe did 2 performances of it. But on the first night, I was like, okay, I got through the song, and now it's coming up to the end of the play, and I kiss her, and when she wakes up. And just as I was about to kiss, she's asleep or dead or whatever's going on with her. Just as I was about to kiss her, she put her hand on her mouth. She put her hand on her mouth, so I had to kiss her hand. Yeah.
She's asleep.
Where is she now? I'd like to know.
Yeah, I don't believe she's in the industry anymore.
Chris, you come here having already sort of established yourself on TV and film, and I know you actually trained initially, I believe, as a theater actor, but you've kind of had this experience with Hollywood and internationally doing that, something that I know Tony, Neil, and some of the others. I just wonder for you, having experienced that, and there's certainly, I would imagine, perks to those mediums in terms of pay, maybe even hours, and different things like that. What for you was the attraction to the theater, and for the guys who have gone there and now have come back, what keeps you coming back?
Well, I mean, it's nice being able to rehearse, and in a way, it's kind of the best bit, to really delve into a character 10 hours a day for 5 weeks, and to explore it without anybody recording it and recording your thoughts as you're going through it is very liberating. You don't feel like you're constantly on show, even though it is the one time where there's loads of people watching you in the rehearsal room, but none of it is judgment. It's more like everybody, it's the journey rather than the destination. And every time the camera goes on, it's like, this is the end result. And there's something very nice about that. Being actually, particularly when the writing is so good. In a play like Of Mice and Men, the writing really stands up. So I'd say it's those 2 things really. Having great writing, which usually if something makes it to the stage, the writing's great. Whereas I've done loads of scripted work on TV, which is okay, and that's fine too, So yeah, I'd say those 2 things is why it was great to come back and do some.
And Neil and Tony, for you, having sort of lived in both worlds. What keeps you coming back to the theater?
I have a authentic love affair with the talented people that do it 8 times a week. Every time I see a show, whether I like the show or not, you can't help but respect the physical demands of doing a show 8 times a week. Whether it's a musical where they have to be physically, you have an ensemble that's not getting paid well, but they're killing it and they're limber and they're hurt and they're still doing it and they're singing, or whether it's a one-man show, all of it impresses me, the duration of it. I feel like they're athletes. And I totally concur with what you say. Like when you're filming a movie or a TV show, you're going off of your instincts and your sort of quiver of tricks and bits that you can do because you know that you only have 4 takes and when you never do it again, ever. But to watch someone do their 175th version of this show, and it's my first time to see it, and I still feel like it's fresh and exciting and interesting. That to me is a super skill that all of them have, and on this level you are required to, given the cost of a ticket now. People sit there and they demand excellence from what you're doing, and I think then the athlete in me wants to perform at that level.
Tony?
Yeah, I think when you distill it all down, the theater is really the actor's medium. I mean, if you want to look at it that way, I look at film as really the director's medium, and really the editor's, and then TV is more the writer's medium. I mean, of course, we see our favorite TV stars, but really it's the writing that's driving that. And in the theater, when the writer and the director finally step back, then it's us. That's the connection between the viewer and the life on the stage. And so it's great to return to that. I think it's healthy to return to that for actors. Movies are great and TV is can be lucrative and all of that, but it's. I think it's healthy to not have a steady diet of just one.
And now to kind of hone in on the roles that you're all currently involved with, just curious how you first heard about it, how it first came to your attention, and sort of what most appealed to you about pursuing it. And so Andy, for Rocky, it's a different kind of role than
It's definitely the most challenging I've ever done, but it came about 3 years ago when Lynn Ahrens and Steve Flaherty, who are the music writers, and Tom Meehan was doing the book, were auditioning for a Rocky. And I thought, my agent called me with Rocky the musical, and I thought, what are they thinking? That's got to be the stupidest idea ever about a musical. But I went back and I watched the film, and it's this. You think about this Rocky franchise, but it's all started with this first independent film. It's shot beautifully. It's a simple story about a guy who's got nothing and is given the opportunity of a lifetime, but he's got all this heart and dignity behind it. And so it actually made a great story for a musical. And I was like, wow, that's impressive. I hope they do the music right. And Ahrens and Flaherty are just geniuses, is the way they found the characters through this music. And so I actually auditioned with some of the music. Immediately on auditioning, I was like, I know this role. I know it. I could feel it. I'm in this room, and I have no trouble doing this role. Maybe it's something about like how I grew up, or coming from a working class family and appreciating everything we had. But there was something about this role that I felt like I could do honestly, and I felt like I could really persevere through it physically, and I wanted to take that challenge. So I just petition for it with them, and I kept doing a reading, and we did a workshop where we did all the fighting out in Brooklyn. We sort of choreographed all that stuff. They took it to Germany, which I don't speak any German, and I thought it was going away from me, and I was sort of sad and depressed about that. But when it came back here, I made sure that I auditioned my butt off for that show, because I thought, what would Rocky do? He'd get up and fight for the role of a lifetime, and I kind of I have to follow that sort of mantra throughout the entire process of this show. 8 shows a week, and the physicality of everything. I have to take on that Rocky spirit and show up for the audiences, and they're given so much back at night. But yeah, I spent about 3 years with this role, and it's become the role of my lifetime as far as what I've ever done. So I'm having a fantastic time right now.
And Tony, here you are with 3 very different characters that you're portraying. Was that sort of a big part of the appeal, or were you interested in that era? What drew you to act?
Well, I had done a workshop of this, like you had, about over a year and a half ago with Lapine, and I had never worked with Lapine before. I knew him, and I admire him very much, and. I guess there was something about when I approach any material lately, I look for those things that are that seem undoable or wrong or sort of impossible, challenging, and this just seemed like there's just no way I can pull this off. I can name you 5 other actors who could really nail this one, but it was daunting and a little terrifying, and. But the material is so rich, and it's based on this glorious book that theater people and others love. It's all about all of our stories, really. It's starting out at a very young age, having this, getting whacked in the head by seeing a play, a gorgeous piece of theater, and the hook gets set, and then your whole life just becomes about that journey. And so I just. I wanted to try and see if I could, do something that was a little bit outside my wheelhouse, and also the idea of being able to do 3 characters, just felt like a good chance to fail.
Yeah. Now, James, I understand that you saw Aladdin at a very young age and kind of knew even then.
Yeah. I was 17 years old. It was 1992, and as a graduation present, because I'm a huge Disney nerd, my mom took me to see Aladdin, and I remember sitting in the theater, and I'm a huge fan of stand-up comedy. I just love stand-up. Richard Pryor, Whoopi Goldberg, Robin Williams, those guys. I love that. Just standing on stage with the mic and just trying to be funny and make people laugh. I love that. And so I watched Friend Like Me, and I leaned over to my mom, and I was like, I want to do something just like that, because it was like everything. It was like Disney, it was comedy, it was musical theater, it was everything all in one. And I knew I wanted to be a Disney character. I just didn't know how the heck it was going to happen. And so I got the blessing of being in.
You auditioned for The Little Mermaid.
Pretty much, I tried. They were like, I'm sorry, just don't look good in fins. And I went, okay, fine. So I took Memphis instead, and I was sitting at home, and on Broadway.com, because I'm also a Broadway nerd, they had this picture that they were going to be doing Aladdin at the 5th Avenue in Seattle. And I screamed to my wife, I'm like, they're doing Aladdin, and I know they're not going to pick me. They're not even going to look at me. And they literally began auditioning, and they auditioned every brother, and when I mean brother, I mean every black dude in New York, and they didn't call me. And I was so upset. I was just like mad at the world. I'm like, I need to talk to somebody. Somebody needs to see me. And finally, Casey Nicola was directing Book of Mormon, and one of the cast members, he was asking, he's like, I'm looking for a guy to do the Genie. And they were like, well, have you seen James Iglehart? He was like, no, who is that? They're like, well, he's in Memphis. And so they called my agent, and I went in, and my agent called me and sent me the stuff, and I looked at my wife and I said, they're either gonna love me or hate me. And I happened to know a friend of mine who was playing the auditions, and I said, is anybody doing voices or changing characters or being funny? He was like, no, everybody's playing it really straight. I'm like, has anybody watched the movie? So I got the sides, and I did what you're not supposed to do. I literally started marking out lines and writing in my own improv things or things I was gonna do. And I just went in there and started cartwheeling cartwheeling and jumping on the floor, and I felt so bad for the reader. He had no idea where I was. He was just like, I thought those lines aren't here. And also, I'm so naive. I didn't realize I was auditioning for Casey Nicola. I thought it was some dude from Seattle. I didn't know what he looked like. So I just had no fear. And so when they said you got the role, I was so happy. I was just, this is all I've ever wanted. And the Genie is my favorite character of all time with Disney. So I was like, sure, I'll take it. And we didn't even know we were gonna go to Broadway. They said, this is just for Seattle, we'll see what happens. Yeah. And the fact that we're here and I'm at this table right now, man, wishes come true, baby.
That's great. And Chris, for your first Broadway role, it's a pretty special one.
Yeah, and I heard about it maybe 6 months ago. Is that right? No, middle of last summer, nearly a year ago, I guess now. And I've been asked if I would be interested in it, and I was like, yeah. And then it went away because their first choice became available. and I was really disappointed. But I tried not to think about it. I started looking for another gig I was on a job at the time. And then a few months later, he couldn't get out of his contract on some TV job. And so it came around again, and I just jumped at it. I think we had the contract signed within 48 hours. I don't think there was any negotiating. And
you don't want to tell us who that was.
I'll tell you after. He would have been great.
And Jefferson, having previously, I guess in some ways flexed some of these same muscles, because obviously, I think, how many characters was it the last time that you...
37.
37 in I Am My Own
37,
Way.
but they were all, by default, wearing a little black dress and pearls and a headscarf.
And it was just obviously wonderful, very well received, and yet this was a totally kind of different sort of challenge and tone and all of that, and I guess, was that, were you in any way intimidated or daunted by this?
Yes, certainly I was. Number one, it's a musical, and this is my first foray into the Broadway musical, and I just so agree with you. They're Olympic athletes. Unbelievable. The benchmark is so high. The excellence. As so-called straight play actors, we can sort of muddle through, come in hungover sometimes and do our best work. But
why do you look at me when you say
that? You have such a lovely, open, receptive face. But anyway, so that, yes, I was absolutely terrified, and I think that's a good reason to do something. At least that's what I tell myself. But I was asked to do a reading of it about 5 years ago, so I was granted the luxury of time, to do a couple of days and then go away for a year and come back to it, and that's such a rare and wonderful thing. And it was based on the same source material that gave rise to this delightful 1950s Ealing Studio comedy, Kind Hearts and Cornets, starring Alec Guinness, that I saw when I was very young at my brother's College Film Society through a haze of pot smoke. and that was one of those experiences that made me fall in love with acting, the transformative nature of it.
And Neil Hedwig is one of the most colorful parts you could ever find. Was that sort of, were you looking to just come back to Broadway, or was this the part that made you want to come back?
I got a call from David Binder, the producer of the show, and he wanted to know if I would be interested in playing Hedwig, and it was 3 years ago, and I was in the middle of a TV show. So I thought, that's a great move in a career, but I can't do it. They needed X number of weeks to recoup, and then you have to add the previews, and then you have to add the rehearsal, and it just doesn't fit. And so I said, can you wait? And he said, well, let me see. And he went back to John Cameron Mitchell and Stephen Trask, who were producing as well. And they were willing to wait a year, and then another year, and I got the same call, but the show was still on. And so I said, I just can't. And we tried to figure it out, and it wouldn't work. And so I got a call from them, David, saying that they're going to have to move on, that they wished it had been great. And then they went to directors, and they found Michael Mayer, and Michael said to them, who are you interested to cast? And they said, who do you think? He said, well, have you thought of Neil? And they said, yeah, he's not available. And he said, well, when's he free? And they said, probably a year and a half from then. And he said, well, wait. So they waited for this show to end, which is just fantastic. And during that period of time, I could ruminate on the idea of playing Hedwig, and I was just like, that's such a ferocious part, and having just spent the better part of a decade playing an alpha male sitcom scenery chewer, it felt like, wow, it would be impressive on many levels to be able to be in essentially a one-person show, and that would be just great as a move, career-wise. But then I also was sort of terrified by the notion of being so flamboyant and feminine and carrying myself in a way that I've just never, ever done. I have no previous history with heels or wigs. Some do. I mean, some people have played, Lacage and on the road, I don't know, whatever, but I just never had. And so to go from never having done that to standing on a Broadway stage doing it scared me, like people would see through me and see that I couldn't pull it off, and scared me, and like, how do I invest in that time? And so I had the benefit of time, to be honest. I knew that once I knew that it was happening, I had time to work with Heels and Spencer Liff, the choreographer, and clomp around for hours at a time and figure out how to stand. And then I would get to do 3 weeks of How I Met Your Mother, come here for a week, and work on just book work. And then I'd go back and do 3 weeks on How I Met Your Mother, and on the 4th week we'd have off, I'd come here and do music work with Stephen Trask. And then I'd go do 3 weeks on the show and come back, and we set the whole show for 1 week, and then I went back and did the final 3 weeks of the show, and we had 2.5 weeks of rehearsal. So it was weirdly part and parcel, but in that I feel like I did have time to sort of let things settle. But that part is so unlike anything I have ever wanted to do and ever been able to do or ever thought I could do. And I think that what Jefferson said is so true, is if you challenge yourself through things that you're afraid of, on this scale especially, it demands attention, and personal attention, I mean, not from fans or from people watching, but you have to be on point, and you can't phone it in.
Well, that kind of leads nicely into the next question I wanted to ask you guys, because in one way or another, you guys are all getting a serious workout every time you do this show. I mean, quite literally, and then getting in the ring. You are schwitzing up there on a nightly basis. I mean, I don't know how you have so much energy. The transformations from character to character so quickly. Obviously, you're all over the place in that show. And I think even just probably in the way that you have to carry yourself as Lennie and things like that, it's gotta be a draining experience. And so what I wonder is, what you guys just, find the most challenging aspect of doing this 1, sometimes 2 times a day, and then also how you manage to recover. Are you constantly constantly wiped out, or do you have a trick to kind of enduring this? And so, Jefferson, again, in a split second, you're a different guy on the show. It's I think probably as much a physical challenge as anything.
I think it's more athletic than artistic sometimes. But everything happens very quickly, and I'm indeed in perpetual motion doing these costume changes. And I must say, a lot of it is done to me by my extraordinary dressers. Sometimes there are up to 4 people working on me at one time. I go running off stage into the dark. These 4 muscular and determined people set upon me, tear my clothes off, thrust me into a new outfit, tear off a mustache, slap on a wig, squirt water in my mouth, and push me back out on stage like an expert pit crew at the Indianapolis 500. So I'm just sort of a spinning top, through that. But how does one get through it? I eat a lot of sushi, actually,
Really?
a lot of salmon. And I think that's the best pre-show meal I've discovered, at least for this thing. And then I just drink water, electrolyte, fortified water throughout. I think about certainly over a quart.
Wow. Andy, that's real fighting in there. And while it's choreographed, you still do get hit. And I know that I've read things where you talk about being in some degree of pain a lot of the time. Can you take that and expand upon that?
What's really interesting is about the show is all about that. Really, it's about Rocky's first number. He's talking about his nose ain't broken. It's the one thing he has that, he's got 10 sore knuckles, he's got bruises. I'm living every lyric of that song, which is great. It's a great way to just like sink right into the character and not, it's right there. It's all visceral for me. This is all messed up. My foot is, and I got hit so hard 2 nights ago, I literally blacked out for a count because these punches were making full contact, and it's something that Steve Hoggett, the choreographer, came up with because we are in sort of we're being viewed from 360 degrees. We have audience behind us, in front of us. There's no tricks to be able to fake that like a camera can. So we figured out this whole science and this choreography of I know when each punch is coming, but to delegate the percentage of how much those punches come varies from night to night. And I certainly, Rocky is always the guy that gets hit and keeps coming back, so I take my punches every night. And I've learned a human physical condition of being able to take a punch, and it's something that took a couple of weeks. I had several black eyes, and my neck was always sore during rehearsal, and fluctuating weights. I was up to 190 because I wanted to be a heavyweight champ, and then I dropped back to 182. And now I'm down to 177, and it's a variable craziness of physicality. Luckily, I've done enough Broadway shows where it's 8 shows a week, as we all know. It's very physically demanding. I just knew this one was the next level up. So the trainer, the food, getting in there and trying to keep everything physically active and clean is a huge part of what my life is. I live like a nun who gets punched in the face. that's my life.
And James, those costumes that you have to wear are not exactly light in some of the cases, and you have so much activity up there that it's like nonstop.
From the time I come out of the lamp, it's a good straight 15 minutes. The first introduction and then the actual 8-minute song just going, and the song switches genres through the whole thing, and then I have to just stay energetic and hyper the entire time. But I love it. I can't lie about that. I was a hyper kid. Most people would call it ADHD. I was just a hyper kid. But as far as the physicality of it, my dresser, again, is also fantastic. There's water there, there's a fan there, there's a towel there. And I know that I can't eat as heavy as I am. I cannot eat really heavy before I go on stage. I have to eat really light, like sushi or like a good grilled chicken or something before I go, which is funny because as Casey likes to say, he wants me to stay hefty but healthy, because watching a very small person do what I do would not be impressive. Watching a brother who's damn near 300 pounds jump up and down like that, people go, "Oh, that's amazing, he's gonna die." And I hear that, and people go, "Do you have oxygen on stage?" I'm like, I know you think that's a compliment, but it's not. You move so well to be so big. I know what you think that means, but no, But I stretch a lot. I have a physical therapist who makes sure that that I'm okay and puts my back in line, because I do a lot of cartwheels and stuff like that. And she puts me back and fixes me. And then my wife has me on a high protein diet to make sure I stay hefty and still fill out my costume, even though I'm jumping around and sweating buckets. But also, you get to be a crazy cartoon character. I get to do all the things on stage that I think about doing when I'm walking down 42nd Street. So it balances out.
That's great. And Chris, how do you find it?
More than I definitely I put on a good bit of weight for the character, so I feel sometimes like I'm not as healthy as I would like to be. But more than that, I think it's the vocal stuff I've been more surprised about, and how to control that. Lennie is, in many ways, is just an animal. And so when he shouts at somebody, it needs to feel uncaged and whatever. So it's trying to control your voice in a way that you don't ruin your voice every night, I find a little bit tricky. And haven't necessarily always achieved it. I've taken a couple of steroid shots at various points along the way, and I'm always drinking some weird tea to sensitize some part of me, and all that kind of stuff. And I've seen a bunch of doctors, and they're manipulating your neck to make sure that you do this thing and this, all that kind of thing. So I think I hadn't done a play in 5 or 6 years before we did this, and I think the rustiness definitely shows in that regard. And that's what I've probably found most surprising, because I generally feel vocally very capable. But when you do it like that, 8 shows a week is really where it shows.
Neil, I mean, to be in such a hyperkinetic kind of character, this guy is up, climbing up the side of the stage, sliding down cars, you know, all flipping things all around. I mean, for you, what's the secret to getting through that?
The conceit of the show is that it's only one performance, and that Hedwig is following Tommy Gnosis around everywhere he goes, and so she's taken over this theater for just the night. So there needs to feel a sense of unbridled explosiveness, and through that, I'm being asked to channel Iggy Pop. And when he did it, he was like high on heroin and all kinds of shots. But that physicality is important. And so I've just tried to be as preventative and preemptive as possible. I did a stint as the MC in Cabaret in its first go-round, and had to leave the show a couple weeks early because I stomped around in those combat boots so much I got stress fractures on all my toes. So I didn't want that to happen in the heels because I didn't want to be aggressive and too aggressive, and then I don't have an understudy in the show. So I have to do it whether I'm well or not. So I've just been very conscious of I have physical therapy twice a week for a long time, on my feet. Nothing's wrong with them now, but that's the point. And vocal lessons, specific vocal lessons into a microphone instead of out to a massive audience, because that's what I'm doing. But within it, I'm just getting beat up all the time. I mean, every show is different intentionally, and I'm a little masochistic in that regard, because I don't want to just feel like I'm doing the same thrashy movements, because then it starts to feel like choreography to me. So I'll just jump up and throw on myself on the ground, which I did last night, and my legs started bleeding. And so then I'm trying to do a dramatic song after that, and I can hear the whole front 3 rows going, he's bleeding. Look, is that real blood? But that's the excitement of it. So you have to give it all and yet protect yourself. And I don't know what that exact dynamic is, but you don't want to feel as if you're doing a protected performance, because I think people can sniff that out pretty quick. So,
Tony, over the years, has there been a secret that you've arrived at for how to get through any show?
Well, the key to the answer is in the question. Over the years, who knew theater was a younger man's game? As I get older, and it's funny, we have a set. I concur with everything these guys have said. It's true for me. I have to watch what I eat, when I eat, what I sleep, when I sleep, how much I sleep. I have cut out, coffee, caffeine, wine, all the fun stuff, dairy for the most part, and just because you need to have your energy kind of sustained over a long period of time. I would love to have, my usual routine of 3 or 4 cups of coffee in the morning and then a shot of espresso later in the day, but it's just too up and down.
Oh my God, I drink a Red Bull at half hour.
I can't do it. See, if I did that, I would have a great show and then not sleep. So I would pay for it the next day. So mine is, and then we have a set. I mean, certainly not physical like this, but it's a set. We have 5 or 6 staircases it's 3 tiers, and so we're always running up and down these stairs, and we're on a gigantic turntable, which we're stepping on and off of as it's moving quite quickly. And it's funny. Every 2 or 3 performances, I'll be just sort of like running up a set of stairs to get into place, and I'll feel like something in my hip. I go like, okay, no, what the hell is that? Where? And then that'll go away, and then it'll be something. And something is just moving around. So I do go to a physical therapist. I go to she's a vocal massage person. Have you heard about this?
Yes.
She puts her fingers in your throat and pushes on things. And because I have the trouble with by the 7th or 8th show of the week, my voice is getting pretty ragged. And so it's all of those things are challenging, but it's also the audience gives us back a lot, and I work with a great company of people, great actors, and I also have a dresser who is a miracle worker. I don't know how he does it. Not only does he quick change me many times, but he he's kind of like a therapist back there for me. When I'm sort of like in a panic or something, he's just like, it's all good.
But I mean, luckily, once award season is over, we can just start phoning it in.
That's the thing I've been waiting for, you know.
Well, I've got a case of wine at home. The 9th of June, I'm going to polish the whole thing off.
Once June 9th is over, I'm just walking on with pizza. It's like, hey, can your friends do this?
Now, guys, we're running a tad over, so I hope we can do a rapid fire with this last thing. And actually, it's kind of fun. Just the first thing that comes to mind, just please shout it out, and we'll go. Weirdest thing in your dressing room? Anybody?
I've actually got quite a lot of mice.
Mice?
Yeah. They were presents relating to the show. They're all prop mice.
Whoopi Goldberg gave me a pair of high-heeled shoes last week. These
There you
big
go.
platform Lady Gaga-looking shoes. Those are cool.
Anybody else?
I've got balls of thread. I have to pick up lint in the show, so I save I save random wads of thread, so I have them on myself. That sounds completely insane.
I have tons of comic books in my room.
Comic books. Okay.
I have a death certificate.
All right.
I have a giant painting of Stallone that's on
There you
the
go. Okay, the person whose attendance at your show has meant the most to you.
Oh, I had James Earl Jones come on opening night, who was the last person to play Lennie on Broadway, so that was pretty cool, yeah.
My mom, she stood up and then cried falling down, which was fun. Yes.
Harry Belafonte came.
Nice. There's a 9-year-old kid, Liam, who was dressed in all Rocky gear, and that's kind of the spirit I had when I was that kid.
Anna Wintour.
Oh, wow.
Opening night, arms raised up, clapping and cheering. Out of her comfort zone. I was very pleased that she was there.
Intermission activity. Your one thing you're always gonna you do during intermission.
Gotta pee.
Gotta be.
I get no intermission.
That's right. That's right.
Oh, that's right.
I get re-glittered.
Re-glitter. That's right. Okay. What you do on your day off?
I lie in my oxygen tent.
I read the Hollywood Reporter.
Hey, there we go. That's it. 8 shows a week. If you could have it your way, what would that number be? Instead, if you could.
3. I'd love to do 3 shows a week.
Six would be civilized.
Six would be
I'd
civil.
say I could probably live with 7.
We do 7, and I wish we could do 8, weirdly.
There you go. The weird or the most annoying thing that audience members do at your show, periodic, at any show.
Sometimes at the start of our show, somebody will, a teenage girl will just shout, James Franco! Which is quite an informative heckle.
Right.
I get
I think
lots
she
of-
was at our show the other day and she yelled that too.
Same girl.
People think Hedwig is Rocky Horror sometimes, so they think that if they shout out something like, I love you, Barney,
Right.
then I will have to berate them in some way, and they're kind
Right.
of giddy looking forward to that, so.
I think cell phones, of course, are the horrible
They still
thing.
going off a lot?
They do go off.
It's not the cell phone.
You see the glow,
It's
too.
the iPads that people don't think you can see. Because they're big. And it's just like, you're like,
The other
really?
thing is,
yeah,
I
there's
gotta
nothing-
say this, and and this is a pet peeve of mine. Coughing in the theater. Okay, I mean, I know some people have whatever, but
It's contagious.
Cough once, cough twice. If
Right.
you have to cough more than that, get out.
Yeah.
And go out and cough in the lobby. Really.
It's like they look at all the posters and you're like, you know what, honey, that would be a great place to go and cough to.
Let me put out one that I imagine you might have conflicted feelings. Entrance applause. How do we feel about entrance applause?
I open the show. I love it. Please clap for me.
I demand it.
You did-
I'm playing Hedwig.
For me, it's a little awkward because I come out as a narrator, and sometimes it's there and sometimes it isn't, and I never know how long
Right.
to wait, and I feel terrible if I wait too long. And then every once in a while, there's like a. So I'm kind of like, and then I start, and then and then I have to.
And finally, just in a sentence for each of you, if you could dictate, if you had your way, what would you like people to leave your show thinking or feeling differently or doing differently than they were before they came in? Going back into the world, what do you want them to take away?
I actually get a lot of people telling me how inspired they are after the show, and they want to run a marathon, which is great because at least I can give them the physicality, but they also go away with a lot of spirit, a lot of up spirits.
I think ours is really about success and failure, in that and I hope they take away the idea that, you know, failure is not such a terrible thing, and it's kind of, it's sort of essential. There is no success without some failure along the way.
The last song of the show says "Lift up your hands" and speaks about the misfits and the losers kind of within all of us. And I think the story of Hedwig's feeling incomplete and realizing that the incompleteness is what makes her complete is a really wonderful thing that I think people don't think they're going to expect, don't think they're going to get, and then actually leave the theater feeling.
Yeah. We're better when we're together. Don't let the machine divide us.
I really want people to be entertained. Our show is really escapism, you know, for kids and for parents and for couples. You know, when they come and see our show, I want them to leave the dregs of the real world outside, come to Agrabah, laugh, fall in love, and then walk out going, damn, that was fun. You know?
Yeah, I agree. When people leave after having laughed a lot and being taken out of themselves and falling in love again with musical theater, it's the best.
Well, on behalf of The Hollywood Reporter, and I'm sure a lot of fans who are going to tune into this, thank you guys so much for your time, and been very enlightening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers, Scott. Huzzah.